Welcome back to Business Week on Arise News. Joining me now to review some of this week's top business stories is the CEO of Graham Black Advisory, Zeal Akaraiwe. He is an experienced treasury and financial advisory executive with an extensive history of working in the banking industry. Thanks for joining me on the program today, Zeal. Great to see you again. Hope you're all recovered from all the election tension.
Yes.
You are. Good.
Yes.
Good to see you. You look very relaxed. So we're going to start with the story which everyone has been talking about, obviously the Swiss bank rescue.
Yes.
Switzerland now has, or the world really, the global banking industry now has this mega banking giant, UBS, acquiring Swiss. What do you make of the rescue package of 3.25 billion?
To be honest, I don't think Switzerland had a choice. And as a country, Switzerland's value proposition to the world is its banking sector. And they cannot afford for anything to go wrong. Their banking contributes about 10% of their employment and 10% of their GDP. So they can't afford to do anything that would imply that their banking sector is not solidly backed by the government. And they needed the world to understand that that confidence exists and will not be reneged on. And more importantly, if you notice, they made it clear to the world that it's faster to pass a law protecting banks than to get a board to do that. I think that was a clear message to the world that our banking sector is solidly backed by government because this is a crucial sector to Switzerland.
Yeah, it is a crucial sector. But, you know, we all thought maybe gone were the days when we would say there's a bank that's too big to fail. How long can these sorts of rescue and government interventions in these large banks continue? And what are the risks and implications for the global economy or the global financial system?
I think, you see, the way banks are structured create that natural risk. The question is, what are the mitigants that we must enforce to ensure that these types of mismatches are not, or rather are contained in the context of the bank's existential experience? It's not easy to do that because if there's a run on virtually any bank in the world, it will go down because you have short-term liabilities and you're putting them in long-term assets. That's what banking is. But there has to be some kind of buffer, and I think the entire banking regulations will need to be reviewed in such a way that the banking experience becomes more solid and more long-term viable.
Yeah, and do you agree, actually, that what triggered all of this was really the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and some of the other American banks? Or do you think this was inevitable anyway, regardless of the SVB issue?
It's a yes and no, Rolake, because banking is about confidence.
Yes, of course.
Once that confidence is eroded, it doesn't matter how good your ratios are. If you do not have what your clients need at that point, which is what I meant by if there's a run on the bank. If everybody at the bank wanted their money at the same time, I don't think there's any bank in the world that will survive.
Yeah,
it's about confidence. And once that confidence could be a contagion from something that is not even related. So, which is why these central banks, the regulators of banks in countries, continuously perform stress tests and show up whatever capital requirements the banks are required so that short-term shocks don't have this kind of massive impact. Indeed.
And speaking about confidence, the CBN has raised rates in Nigeria to 80%, a lack of confidence over inflation in the immediate term. You know, what are your thoughts on this?
Talking about CBN is always very dicey. Personally, monetary policy in Nigeria takes anywhere from 9 to 18 months for the impact to be felt. So monetary policy ought to be proactive. What I've seen from our monetary policy in the recent times has been they've been reactive, which is why it's not achieving what it should. Monetary policy, we've looked at it. Best case scenario, you change rates before it seeps into the economy to make the impact you want. Best case scenario is 9 months.
Are you saying CBN acted a bit too quickly on this rate rise?
I think CBN held rates for the longest time when we all saw this crisis coming. I think they acted too late.
Yeah, okay.
I think they took their jolly time.
So what you're saying, if rates had been raised much earlier, then we wouldn't be where we are now. Inflation now at 21 point.
I think if rates had been raised much earlier, it wouldn't have needed to have been this drastic. And it's not just rates. It's a combination of errors that the central bank has made. It's not just one thing. There are some things, in fairness to the central bank, that are outside their control regarding the structural composition of an economy, on how it relates to inflation. But on what central bank itself could have done, I think they acted a bit late.
And what is going to be the impact on consumer confidence and spending? I mean, consumers are already in a tight corner, let's face it. You know, how much more, is this going to pinch consumers?
I think beyond the 50 basis points, let me put it like this. The sensitivity of consumers or the sensitivity of prices to rates is much lower than the sensitivity of prices to foreign exchange, for example.
Right, okay.
So the rate hike, to be honest, like I said, it's the impact to the larger economy is going to take a long time, and it's not going to be as significant as we would like it to be.
Yeah,
it's
indeed.
just indicative, I mean.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about the exchange rate for a while, but most people were forecasting post-election an adjustment, a sort of shrinking of the differential between the parallel market and the official exchange rate. What are your thoughts? Do you have any sort of projections for the naira going forward?
Well, yes. I think that between now and when the new government resumes, I don't expect the central bank to do anything regarding foreign exchange. I don't expect it. It's not like fuel subsidy that you can announce a forward date of activity or action. You can't do that with FX. You can't say we're going to devalue in 3 months or 6 months because you're just going to create panic immediately.
Yeah.
So I expect that. And this week's MPC, I think, is the last. No, there's one more in May.
Yeah.
But I don't imagine that if they didn't do anything now on FX, I don't imagine between now and May they would do anything. I think they'll just kick that can down the road and expect the new government
give the headache to the next
as they've done with petrol subsidy.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. Okay, so now the reps have increased their level of activism. They're telling CBN to direct banks to immediately overhaul their electronic platforms. What is interesting about this? It's not like you can just overhaul your platforms overnight. This, I think, is a burden that should have been picked up a long time ago. Now we're seeing the real nationwide impact, and we're all feeling it. What can really change and happen in the short term? We know there's a problem with electronic banking. We're seeing all the issues with money transfers. Then you layer that on with the cash crunch. Is it time for a more radical reform of Nigeria's financial sector?
I think it was Einstein that said you cannot solve a problem by the same level of thinking that got you in there in the first place. And that's what we're trying to do. A lot of the problems around this cash issue were self-inflicted. And the thinking that got us there, we need to overhaul that thinking in the first place. To be honest with you, prior to this cash crunch that created a lot of pressure on the electronic banking system, I would say that it was working 99% of the time, if not more. It was working, in my opinion, satisfactorily. What the central bank failed to do, in my opinion, was to get penetration into the unbanked. That was where the big issue for me was. And if you want to do that, there's a sequence. It's like a project management issue. Yeah. There's a sequence of activities. What we've done is put the cart before the horse. Whip out the cash and say survive, and people begin to sink. That's what exactly is going on. So what we need to do is we have about anywhere between 30 to 40 million Nigerians unbanked. We need to pull them in. As you pull them in and give them access to banking channels, that would be a natural stress test for the system to see how it operates. Do we need to overhaul it going forward? Obviously, we need to do that. But by how much do we need to do it? The central bank created too much of a shock in the system by pulling out so much cash in such a short time frame. And that was the issue. They did not give enough notice, and they did not stress test enough, and did not project the impact enough to be able to give the banks the instruction or the time to react properly. Yeah, interesting time for financial services. Quick comment on the news of Air Nigeria. I know many of us who hear this, there's a healthy degree of skepticism, but are you optimistic that finally we will get a national carrier that will be sustained in the long term? What are your thoughts? Ask me the question differently. Am I optimistic that we need a national carrier? I don't think we need a national carrier to start with. But again, subject to how we manage it, and that has been the issue we have had across most of our projects. Once the government is involved, are we able to manage it properly? The Minister for Aviation has been on this for at least 6 years, and it's been going on. I know that they went to the ICRC to get the outline business case approval in 2018. The outline business case approval is valid for 1 year. So the assumption is that within a year, you'll get your full business case approval and all that. And we've been 5 years down the line. He hasn't quite done that. I don't see how he intends to get this done in 2 months. But if he says he will, and with at least Ethiopian Airlines is on board now, but 2 months, I think, is rather
short.
Aggressive.
Yeah, it is very aggressive. Thanks so much, Zeal. Let's see how that one flies.
Let's see if it flies.
If it flies.
Yes.
Great to chat with you as always.
Thank you very much.